Hello everyone, how are you all? You're probably no stranger to Mabolan, the master storyteller of strange and unbelievable true stories. In his original video, he shared 3 incredible cases, and now I'm going to break them down for you, highlight the main points, and add some of my own thoughts so we can discuss them together. The first story, I'll temporarily name it a $5 bribe, Prince's mansion, and a future superstar. This is the story of a broke teenager who wanted nothing more than to become a star. She had no money, no connections, and no real plan except one. It sounds insane, right? But that $5 gamble would put her face to face with Prince himself, and years later, that same girl would go on to sell more than 100 million records under the name we all know today, Kesha. Afternoon in the early 2000s, a young woman named Rose pulled up to a massive mansion in the Hollywood Hills. She sat there for a moment, nervous, because what she was about to do was very illegal. Rose was a struggling musician. She hadn't made it yet, but she was desperate to break into the industry. And her big plan: sneak into this mansion home to one of the most famous musicians on the planet, hand him her demo CD, and hope that just one song would change her life forever. Now, I know what you're thinking. Who in their right mind thinks breaking into Prince's house is a good career move? Well, apparently Rose did. So, she gets out of her car, CD in hand, and starts walking up the long driveway. Halfway up, there's a Gaetan standing in front of it, the gardener. For a second, she panics, but instead of running, she pulls out a crumpled $5 bill and says, "This is my last $5, please, just let me through." And here's the crazy part: the gardener just smiles, takes the money, and waves her in. Imagine that, bribing Prince's gardener with $5. That has to be the cheapest security breach in Hollywood history. Rose slips through the gate, marches up to the front door, knocks, nothing, no answer. She tries the doorknob, fully expecting it to be locked, but it isn't. The door swings open. She steps inside, and it's like walking into a museum. Priceless art, expensive furniture, a wine cellar, all empty. No guards, no staff, no Prince, just silence. At this point, most people would have turned around, but Rose, nope. She gets into the elevator. As it starts moving, panic sets in. She grabs her clunky Nokia phone and calls her mum. I think I'm about to get arrested." The elevator doors open and there he is, Prince, sitting with a guitar, strumming casually, staring at her. Rose freezes. Prince freezes. For a few seconds, it's just awkward silence. And then, without saying a word, Rose tosses her demo CD onto a table, turns around, and bolts. By the time she reaches the front door, security finally catches up. But instead of calling the police, they let her go. Prince didn't press charges. Lucky for her, because honestly, anyone else probably would have ended up in jail. Now here's the kicker. Prince also didn't care about the CD. He never promoted her, never called his industry friends, basically just told her, "Get out." But here's the twist: Rose didn't need him, because a few years later, under her real first name, Kesha, she became one of the biggest pop stars in the world. Multi-platinum, 100 million records sold. So in the end, sneaking into Prince's house didn't launch her career, but it did leave us with one of the greatest, funniest origin stories in pop music history. Proof that shortcuts rarely work, and success still comes down to talent and perseverance. Second story, I'll temporarily name it From Hollywood to Hero, John Malkovich on a Toronto sidewalk. On a summer night in 2013, a 79-year-old man was walking back to his hotel with his wife when he tripped on the sidewalk and nearly bled to death right there in the street. But he survived thanks to a stranger whose true identity would shock everyone. Marilyn and Jim Walpole were a retired couple from Ohio, visiting Toronto on the last leg of their Canadian vacation. After dinner at an Irish pub, they strolled down a busy street, enjoying the evening. Up ahead was scaffolding covering the sidewalk, nothing unusual, just construction overhead. Dozens of pedestrians walked through without a second thought. So did Marilyn and Jim. But then Jim suddenly tripped, and when he hit the ground, his neck struck a metal pipe sticking up from the pavement. The pipe sliced his neck wide open. In an instant, blood was pouring everywhere. Marilyn froze. 1 second she saw her husband stumble, the next he was bleeding out on the sidewalk. She screamed for help. Now, most people would panic at the sight of this, but two strangers came running. One man pulled out his phone and called 911. The other dropped to the ground beside Jim, took off his scarf, wrapped it tightly around Jim's neck, and applied pressure. And this second man, he was calm, commanding. He told Jim, "You're going to be okay. We're stopping the bleeding. Paramedics are on the way." Then he looked at Marilyn and said, "It's fine, I've got him, stay calm." And amazingly, she did. She actually felt reassured, like this guy had to be a doctor. Who else would act with so much control in such a chaotic moment? The two men stayed with Jim until paramedics arrived minutes later. Before Marilyn climbed into the ambulance, she turned and asked the comm man, "What's your name?" "My name's John. Your husband's going to be okay. Now go." Imagine that your husband is bleeding to death on the sidewalk, and some random guy named John just steps in like he's leading an emergency room. Honestly, most of us wouldn't even know where to put our hands. At the hospital, doctors said Jim was lucky. The cut had missed a major artery by just 1/8 of an inch. Any deeper, and he would have died right there before paramedics arrived. And they made it clear, Jim survived largely because of the quick actions of the two strangers. The next day, Marilyn was determined to find them, but she only had one named John and no way to contact him. That afternoon though, one of the men, the guy who had called 911, actually tracked them down at their hotel to check on Jim. He turned out to be the owner of the pub where they'd eaten that night. Grateful, Marilyn asked, "Do you know the other man? John, the one who saved my husband's life?" The pub owner smiled. "I don't know him personally. The one who saved my husband's life." The pub owner smiled. "I don't know him personally, but I do know who he is actually. You probably do too, because the man who cradled Jim's head, wrapped his scarf around his neck, and calmly saved his life wasn't a doctor at all. It was John Malkovich, the Academy Award-nominated actor, famous for playing powerful, commanding characters on screen. Had just played the role of a real-life hero on a Toronto sidewalk. So yes, sometimes life really is stranger than fiction. Jim nearly lost his life that night, but instead, he and Marilyn walked away with a brand new favorite actor, the man who literally saved him. And those are 3 stories that prove real life can be just as wild as anything you'll ever see on TV. Third story. I'll temporarily name it from rock bottom to Gus Fring. Giancarlo Esposito, buried in debt, once considered ending his own life so his family could collect the insurance money, but then unexpectedly landed the role of Gus Fring in Breaking Bad, and from that moment, his life changed forever. In 2008, a broke actor sat in his living room, drowning in debt, secretly planning how to end his own life so his family could collect the insurance money. But instead of dying, he accidentally walked into a role that would make him one of the most terrifying villains in television history. Carlo was 50 years old, sitting in Connecticut, surrounded by stacks of bankruptcy paperwork. A few years earlier, he had filed, thinking it would fix everything. Instead, it turned into an endless mess. Now, here's the thing, Carlo wasn't some washed-up nobody. He was a real actor, Broadway movies, TV. He had respect, but respect doesn't pay the bills. Despite all his talent, Carlo never landed steady, high-paying work. Meanwhile, he had a wife, 4 kids, and the constant pressure of Hollywood appearances. To the outside world, he looked successful, but behind closed doors, he was broke, exhausted, and felt like a fraud. And one night, staring at the mountain of debt, a thought crept in. What if I died? My family could cash the insurance check, their problems would be solved, and no one would ever know how badly I failed. Pretty dark, right? But he wasn't suicidal because he wanted to disappear. He was suicidal because he didn't see another way out. So, he started asking his wife, casually, about their insurance. And when she told him, yes, we'd be covered. You have a big policy? Carlo thought, that's it. That's the answer. But when he dug deeper, he realized most policies don't pay out on suicide. The whole plan collapsed. So he thought, Maybe I fake an accident. Hang gliding, base jumping, something extreme. Now imagine this guy 50 years old, broke, stressed, suddenly taking up base jumping. Yeah, no one's buying that. Then he thought, what about a hitman? But again, who actually gets away with that? Plus, it's not exactly something you can Google. Cheap hitman near me. Months passed. He was still alive, still broke, still pretending. And then, late 2008, his agent called. Look, it doesn't pay much, but it's for a big show. A huge opportunity for exposure. Carlo almost rolled his eyes. He'd heard that before, but when he read the script, something hit him. The role was for a character who hid in plain sight, someone who looked ordinary, but secretly had enormous power. And Carlo thought, that's me. Every day I pretend everything's fine, when really, I'm drowning. I know how to hide in plain sight. So he took the role and he crushed it. So much so, the producers expanded his part. Suddenly, audiences loved this mysterious character, and as the role grew, so did Carlo's career. Twist ending with commentary. This one part completely transformed his life. The broke actor who once considered ending it all was now making millions, winning awards, and becoming one of the most iconic villains of all time. Because Carlo's full name is Giancarlo Esposito, and the role was Gus Fring, the chicken shop kingpin from Breaking Bad. So yeah, thank God he didn't follow through with those dark plans, because instead of an insurance payout, the world got one of the greatest TV villains ever. In the 3 stories above, which one shocked you the most? If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button, it really helps the channel. And if you want more unbelievable true stories, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications, because I post new ones every week. And hey, drop a comment down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, or maybe you've got a crazy story of your own. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.